Good evening, you're listening to The Truth Tank and I'm your host, The Tank. If this is your first time listening to The Truth Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. Just before we get into tonight's episode, I have some very exciting news. The official Truth Tank merch store is now open for business. You can now purchase wearable truth, support the show, and look good doing it. The first range of Truth Tank merch is called the MK1 collection. MK1 is the first generation of Truth Tank podcast merch. I'm hoping there will be many more to follow. You can find the official Truth Tank merch store on Etsy. The link is in the podcast show notes. It's also on my Instagram and Facebook page and on my Linktree, so you can't miss it. Definitely go check it out. I'd appreciate some feedback on the merch as well. So definitely go check it out and share it around. If you're enjoying the show, it's a great way to show your support. Enough about that. Time to get into tonight's show. So on this episode, we're going to be having a look at one of my favorite film franchises, Predator, and the latest installment in the long-running Predator franchise, Predator Badlands. I finally saw it this week, and you get to listen to my review on it. I'll also be doing a deep dive into the past, present, and future of the Predator franchise. So without further ado, let's get into tonight's episode. This is episode 90 of The Truth Tank. 10 more to 100. Predator Badlands review, the past, present, and future of the hunt and the hunter. Predator Badlands is directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who directed Prey and that animated Predator film Killer of Killers. The film stars Ellie Fanning and Demetrius Schuster Kola Matangi, I think that's how you pronounce his name, as Deck, the young runt outcast Predator. Ellie Fanning plays dual roles, Thea and Tessa, and that's pretty much most of the cast. There's people playing Predators, obviously, but not a lot of people in this film. The only human-like characters are all synths. There's no humans in this character at all, which is also a first for the Predator franchise. There's no humans to hunt. Just before I get into the film review, just a word of warning. This episode will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen Badlands or are planning on seeing it, there will be some spoilers and you have been warned. So the film takes place in the future and follows the adventures of Deck, a young Yautja warrior, which is the correct name for a predator if you don't know. Deck is trying to prove himself to his older brother on the Yautja Prime homeworld, which is a desolate, barren, not very friendly planet. That is until the arrival of the brother's father, the elder king predator that you see in the trailer. Deck is smaller than most predators. He's much smaller than his older brother. He's the runt of his clan, and he's deemed too small to survive by his father. He is pretty much small and weak, but is determined to prove himself. Unfortunately, things don't turn out very well for Deck. He's exiled from his clan and ends up on the remote planet of Genna, which is referred to as the Death Planet. Now, Genna is pretty much the most dangerous planet in the universe. Deck's father is fearful of it, but what lies on Genna is the Casilisk, or the Casilic, I can't remember, which is described as the unkillable prey. So Deck sees this as an opportunity to earn his way back into the clan by killing the unkillable, therefore proving himself as not weak and powerless to his clan. Upon arriving on Genna, he meets Thea, a heavily damaged synthetic, played by Ellie Fanning, who becomes his ally, travel companion, and moral mirror. The pair navigate the brutal and very dangerous terrain of Genna, and like all good adventure stories, they uncover a couple of buried secrets along the way. The door is also opened to Yautja culture, which is one of the first Predator films that really does a deep dive into the background of Yautja culture. It's been hinted at in other films. Alien vs. Predator tried to do it, but didn't really do it effectively. Those films are fucking horrific. It's not really touched upon in the first one. The second one, it does go into it a bit more, specifically the final scenes in the ship. It expands the Predator mythology. Predators goes into it a bit more by bringing new predators into it. But this is the first time we really do get a massive deep dive into Yautja culture. And it's also the first Predator film that has a Predator or a Yautja as the protagonist and not the antagonist, which was really fucking cool. I love that aspect of the film, because Deck's journey is not just about hunting and blood and gore. It's about honor, identity, and his own legacy, and a little bit of revenge thrown in, because you can't have a film about exile and adventure without having a little bit of revenge thrown in for good measure. Now, surprisingly, Badlands contains a lot of subtitles. It's also the first time we've heard a Yautja talk and Yautja language, which is another new element for the Predator franchise, because the Predators haven't really talked up until now. They've made grunts and roars, and they mimic human speech and sounds, but this is the first time we've actually seen a Predator engage in full conversations, which was one of the more controversial aspects in the trailer. There was a little bit of backlash about, can the Predators talk? What will they sound like? Should the Predator talk? I think it's a cool element. It does take a little while to get used to. The few opening scenes was a bit weird, having these two Predators engage in dialogue with subtitles. It's kind of like a foreign sci-fi film in an alien language, but it was really cool. I think it would have been a little weird if you had a main character of a film that didn't really say anything. Yes, it's been done before. Mad Max and the Terminator both had very limited dialogue. I think Mad Max only has like 11 lines in the first Mad Max film. I'm not sure you could have a full film without the good guy, without the main hero saying much of anything. You could do it. I think it helps this film. It doesn't hurt it or detract from the Predator mythology. I think it actually expands it, because the way that Predators talk is fucking terrifying. They have a very intimidating, very brutal sounding, harsh voice, which I think really fits with this film, because the film is fucking brutal. I would have liked to have seen a higher rating, maybe MA, but I also get that they want a commercially successful Predator film, so you can make more of them. There is quite a bit of blood and gore and lots of decapitations in this film, without it being too overly gory. But having said that, I think maybe a director's cut could expand on the more brutal side of Yautja culture. That would be pretty cool. The violence in the film doesn't seem gratuitous or pointless either. It definitely fits the world, this new brutal world of the Predator, because we really haven't seen the Predator homeworld. You see a bit of it in Alien vs. Predator Requiem with the pyramids and the rivers of lava, and that kind of shaped most people's understanding of what the homeworld looked like. And if you read the comics, you would have a better idea. But this is a very different Predator homeworld than the one I was picturing. It's very dusty and desolate, very jagged, brutal landscape. It does fit the whole aesthetic of the Predator and their culture, and you can understand why they are such brutal hunters. It's also something I wanted more of. I wanted more of the Predator homeworld. Dan Trachtenberg has said that he views the Yautja culture as more nomadic hunters than a permanent, sophisticated hunting society that has big cities and things like that. I think both options work, because if you are a fan of the Predator, you know that they're broken up into clans. They're not just all part of the same species, which gives you a lot more possibilities and options to be creative. And the introduction of the feral Predator in Prey, and the ones with the coloured dreadlocks from Predators, the ones that look a little different. What do they call them? The Berserker Predator. I can't remember what they called them, the Super Predators or something like that. You have all these different subspecies of Yautja within the Predator world, which gives a lot more possibilities of different clans and different forms of technology, different appearances, just like humans, which could be really cool in future films or TV shows. And speaking of Predator culture, I watched Predator Killer of Killers last night in preparation for this. I did like it. The time travel kind of aspect of it was kind of cool. And spoiler if you haven't seen that, there will be some spoilers in this quick mini review. The Viking and samurai stories were pretty cool, having it set in the past and having that timeline go from like 800 years ago into 1940, then into what we assume is probably the present day, was pretty cool. There's a bit of a time travel, time freezing aspect in it. The 1940s pilot story, that one was alright. I don't know how I feel about a aerial hunter in a ship. I mean, that Predator did look cool. He didn't really have dreadlocks by the look of him. I think the Predator works better when it's on the ground by itself or in a small group. I don't know. I didn't really like the aerial story as much. The samurai story was my favourite. I thought that one fit really well. The Viking one was good too, but this is a big spoiler. The freezing scene where you see those cryo tube chamber things with all the other characters from the Predator films, that's a bit of a head scratcher because there's a scene where they get a weapon from their cultures and the young American pilot gets the 17-15 pistol from the end of Predator 2 and Prey, which means the Viking woman has been in cryo freeze for quite some time, and so has the Japanese ninja. The Predators and Killer of Killers are more tribal. One kind of looks like the feral predator from Prey. There's a gigantic one that looks kind of like the one from the Assassin Predator from The Predator, which is the fucking worst film in the series. I watched a little bit of that afterwards, and fuck, that film is horrific. I hadn't seen that film in a long time. I was just skipping through just to see some of the key scenes. I watched probably about, 15-20 minutes of it. And in that time, the whole start of that film does a very good job of trying to make fun of and even discredit some of the things that happened in the previous films and which helped to set up the Predator lore. I didn't notice that first time I saw it. I've only seen it once, which was like 2019. And it does a lot of fucking damage in the start of that film. It just turns the whole thing into a fucking joke. And it was written and directed by Shane Black, who was in the original Predator. But anyway, moving along from that cinematic atrocity. The Predators you see in Killer of Killers are definitely more tribal. One looks, like I said, one looks like the feral predator. The King Predator resembles the Predator from Badlands. So Trachtenberg definitely has this vision of how he wants the Predators to go, how he views their culture and the design and all that type of stuff. My concerns and my biggest criticisms of Killer of Killers was I think it kind of dilutes and confuses the timeline of the Predator, because it's one of the few franchises that hasn't really had the timeline completely fucked by endless reboots and sequels that make no apparent sense, like Terminator. That series is so fucked now. I don't think there's any way you can really save it without doing a complete wipe of the last, was it 2-3 films? Dark Fate was fucking shit. Genesis fucking sucked balls. Terminator 3 is garbage. I did like Salvation. I would just wish they could have got a sequel out of that, and that company didn't go bankrupt, because I think that was on the right track. Make it inevitable that Judgment Day always happens, and then you can have the future war that every fucking Terminator fan deep down has wanted to see since those scenes from Terminator and Terminator 2. And apparently James Cameron is co-writing or writing Terminator 7 or 8. And I just don't see how you can make a coherent sequel to Dark Fate, because it was fucking shit. Completely rewrites what he had done in the first 2 films. And why he's attached to it is beyond me, because Dark Fate completely ruined what he had done, and he still produced that film, and you're supposed to get a coherent sequel out of that. Like, the worst part of that is when they changed the Terminators from the T-800s to Rev 7s or whatever the fuck they call them, and the Terminators are more, fluid and more mechanical. They can turn into like fucking things with tentacles and circular saw looking things on them. It's been a while since I've seen that film. They made them too advanced, which makes them kind of less threatening in a way, because the beauty of Terminator was just having Arnold Schwarzenegger as a Terminator coming after Sarah Connor. It was a kind of a hybrid sci-fi slasher film in a way. It's like Jason Voorhees, except he's a machine. And the more he gets shot, the more he reveals his true identity, which was cool in the world of practical effects, but it was also cool in visual storytelling because he got scarier and scarier the more he got shot up. And the last couple of Terminator films, no matter how advanced and sophisticated they try to make the Terminator, it makes it less scary. The Terminator from Genesis was probably one of the worst. It had elements of all the previous Terminators in it, and somehow it still gets beaten. And that's kind of the massive flaw, is no matter how sophisticated Skynet makes anything, it manages to get beaten by a single mother, a future soldier, and whatever other human character tags along for the ride, and the old school T-800. Now, in my opinion, if I think the Terminator franchise is to survive and produce a coherent sequel in the future, they need to pretty much just wipe the slate clean. And this is something we've seen over and over again in Hollywood. They make endlessly shit sequels that make no sense. They try to rewrite history, try to discredit what has come before it, which is usually the classic film that everybody knows and loves. Tries to rewrite it or put a spin on it, like the completely retarded opening for Genesis, where they recreate Terminator but do it a little differently. And when I first saw it, I was kind of on board for like the first half an hour, and then that film gets so convoluted and so fucking ridiculous. It's pretty much a comedy going forth. It was unnecessary, but kind of cool how they went back. Not something I would have done myself, but at least it kind of started off as trying to honor and keep everything in a coherent timeline. It didn't try to. It tried to stick back with the 1984 timeline, and then things got fucked up along the way, and they went into the present 2018, whatever it was, 2016, whenever that film came out. And then it got really confusing. And then making John Connor the bad guy was kind of a cool element, but just executed very poorly. And then Dark Fate comes along and completely ruins the timeline, completely kills off John Connor, replaces him with a Latino woman, and has a lot to say about current political events and less to do with a decent Terminator film. And it's something that Hollywood, and specifically the producers of Terminator, have never really picked up, is the more they keep making the current timeline, the more people hate it. And for some reason, they make enough money, or it's seen as a safe bet. Let's just keep making a version of the same film we've already seen, like 3-4 times before already, and not try anything original. And if there is another Terminator film and it's set in the current timeline, it's become like the Jurassic World films and the Jurassic Park films. It's become very formulaic. It's basically the same fucking shit every couple of years. Yet another new advanced death machine from the future has come forward to kill the leader of the prophesized future resistance and has failed. Now, for all Terminator 3's criticisms and failures, the last 10 minutes of that film are great. It sets up the future war. The future war cannot be averted, and that was the whole point of the Terminator coming back, was to making sure the adult John Connor survives in a fallout shelter, pretty much, because a nuclear war is inevitable. That was the only saving grace of that film, and the last couple of scenes where all the nukes start firing off and blowing up all the major cities around Earth. That leads into Salvation, which was on the right track, and it's just a shame we never got that trilogy, because the future war would have been great, and I think is the natural progression of the Terminator franchise. But enough about that. That was a very impromptu, long-winded rant about Terminator, so let's go back to Predator. Going back to my criticisms of Killer of Killers. My main criticism is that I think it does blur the lines between the established clans in the previous Predator films, and Predator hasn't had its timeline fucked about because it can exist in the past, present, and future, because the Predators live a long time, they've got interstellar travel. If they come from thousands of miles away, it would explain why Earth has changed so much. But they also have some type of freezing capabilities, and which is why they can preserve people in cryo chambers for thousands of years. And that's the problem, is because this clan seems very much like the clan from Badlands. There's a lot of crossover. The Predator clan you see in the final act of Killer of Killers is pretty much the same as the one you see in the opening of Badlands. And that's where the questions come from, because there is a 100% chance that the Predator clan is going to survive. And that's the problem, is because this clan seems very much like the clan from Badlands. There's a lot of crossover. The Predator clan you see in the final act of Killer of Killers is pretty much the same as the one you see in the opening of Badlands. post-credit sequence of all the human characters that have appeared in the previous films, Predator films, such as the Comanche woman, I can't remember her name, from Prey, Danny Glover from Predator 2, and everybody's favourite Dutch. That brings up the question of where do they get them from? If this new, more tribal clan has all these heroes of the Predator films frozen in suspended animation, that would suggest that there is some type of crossover with the other clans, and the other clans don't always get along, as in the comics and in Predators. There's a lot of intertribal warfare, so there's obviously some type of communal storage facility for the universe's most deadly prey that they can freeze in suspended animation to bring them out, so they can either hunt them again or get them to fight each other to the death in the arena like Killer of Killers. That was a cool element in the gladiatorial battle, but I think it was a bit unnecessary because it wasn't the whole point of the Predator to hunt the most dangerous prey to prove themselves to the clan, not so much watch the three best warriors they've come across fight each other. It is cool, but I know that wasn't my favourite element of the story. And I think going forward with the Predator films, there needs to be a very established hierarchy of Predator clans where they fit in on the totem pole of Yautja society and culture, because they all look vastly different. The Predator from the original looks completely different from the Predators from Badlands. Alien vs. Predator did their own more streamlined, clean version, less skulls and tribal decorations and more kind of streamlined armor. And they made the Predator look really young and cutesy, which, yeah, was kind of cool for the time, I guess, but I don't think that's particularly aged well. The feral Predator from Prey was cool. That was a nice addition, having a more feral, tribal, more old school looking Predator. Had a very frightening look to it. The Berserker Red Dread Predator was cool as well. That super Predator that preys on the other one. That was a cool hierarchical part of Yautja society. And that's a story arc they should develop in the future. Some type of intertribal war with the super Predator and the normal Predator. That could be cool. So I'm hoping that Trachtenberg can establish a hierarchy and a timeline for the Predator films going forward. I hope they don't fuck with the timeline too much, and they've learned a lesson from Terminator and franchises like that have become so messy, and any future film has to erase the previous two films just to make fucking coherent sense. Predator, like I said, with the time travel and space, has already done that for them. Maybe they can scratch the Predator from the series and keep the rest. But like I mentioned, my biggest criticism with Killer of Killers is there's this kind of loose blending of the Yautja culture and the different clans. They kind of mix them all into one, because we know the Predator from Predator 2 probably wasn't the same as the first one. Maybe it was part of the same clan, but the ones in Predator 2 all have this kind of orangey, greyish kind of look to them, where the Jungle Predator, the classic Predator, looked like he was from a different tribe. He had different kind of armor. He had a different look to him. Predators, different thing again. Alien vs. Predator, that was a more clean, less tribal, less feral looking clan. And there's hundreds of different avenues you can go down with that. You can design the most far out there feral looking Predator, like the one from Killer of Killers, the big one from the Viking story with the hand pumped sonic fucking cannon thing on his arm. I do like the direction Trachtenberg has gone in. I think it definitely suits Predator Badlands, because he's changed the Predator a little bit with Deck and his brother. You can tell they're younger Predators, which is another element we haven't quite seen yet. And who the fuck knows, actually what these things look like over their lifespan. We've seen the older ones, we've seen the ones in the middle, but Deck is pretty young. And I think that was also another big criticism of the trailers, is they made him look very young and kind of cutesy in a way. He's not a pretty boy Predator. He's pretty horrific looking. This time around, he's kept the classic Predator look with the normal looking mandibles. They're not the feral Predators. They look more like the original Predator that everyone knows and loves. but with a few exceptions. We see a lot of younger predators in this film, as opposed to other films. There's usually just the one main hunter that's like, I don't know, middle age or a younger male predator. We see another predator king, which is vastly different to the previous we've seen. He's got a cool white plaited beard, which was interesting. They have hair, apparently. I thought that was a little too humanish for Predator. They could have been a bit more spiky, like the elder Predator from the first Alien vs. Predator. That movie sucked, but that elder Predator looked fucking cool in that. But I did like the distinction between the younger and older Predators, because Dek and his brother do look like the traditional Predator with some slight alterations. Dek is obviously much younger. He's probably like a 19, 20-year-old Predator. The brother's probably, early 20s. He has a slightly different face. The mandibles are more pushed in together. Dek's are a bit more traditional looking, which I think is cool, making him a bit more individual rather than just having every Yautja look exactly the same, just in a different color scheme or different accessories or whatever. So that was definitely a cool element they added to it. They made the predators a bit more personal looking. But that would also bring up the question is, where does the feral predator fit into the hierarchy? Are they just another subspecies that lives on a different planet? Or is there some type of bigger conflict? I'm getting very predator nerdy here, but my podcast, so... But it is a very fucking interesting one too. I do like that whole traditional tribal element. You haven't seen that in an alien film before, because the aliens are always really sophisticated. The technology is always better than humans, and they can all usually beat them pretty easily. Or you have it the other way with it being a killing machine organism like the xenomorph. I've always been a bit nerdy when it comes to the Predator, because it's kind of half and half. Yeah, it's a moving monster. It's technologically superior to humans. It's got cool technology, which obviously shows high intelligence, but they're also very grounded in tribal rituals, honor, and they have this code. They're not just a brainless killing machine. There's a purpose and a plan to who and how they hunt. I got a little sidetrack there, so going back to Predator design. Some of the biggest criticisms in the trailer were that Dek looked a bit young and he had the hair pulled up. I did actually like the pulled up hair, so you can see the Predator ears. That does look pretty cool. It's like he hasn't kind of earned the helmet, so he has to tie his hair up to keep it out of his face. It definitely gives him a more unique appearance than some of the Predators we've seen in previous films. He starts off desperately trying to prove himself to the clan, to his father and his brother, that he's worthy of his cloak. So he's very much a young Yautja who has to make do with what he's got, and he's trying to desperately prove himself to his clan. So I did really like the tied back hair. The Predator ears were a little creepy at first, and I think obviously the mandibles are all visual effects this time around instead of puppetry, which allowed them to be a bit more expressive. I don't think it takes away from it. It actually, I think, added a bit more, because you could move the mandibles and he could talk and he could roar. And when he roars at the Casilisk, that was a really cool scene. It's very expressionful. You can see the mandibles opening up and the saliva and stuff. So it adds another element. And Dek only briefly wears a mask in this film, so pretty much a majority of the film you're seeing his face. In other films, for the most part, the Predator pretty much wears a mask most of the film, except for like the final fight. So it's cool how Trachtenberg has inverted some of the classic elements of the Predator franchise. Specifically with Dek, he's inverted the protagonist, because the Predator is the protagonist, but he's also been hunted himself this time around, which is not a position that we have seen a Predator in pretty much any film. Apologies for that ranting and rambling and very long-winded synopsis of the film. It's time to plow ahead. So the first act of Badlands is brutal and dramatic. Dek is rendered unconscious after his escape from his father. His ship crash lands on Genna, and our hero is plunged into this very dangerous and brutal world where he himself has become the hunted. As soon as he lands on the planet, there's this immediate tension. You feel this very vast, hostile alien world, and Dec has just been plunged right into the middle of it. So Dec is stranded on this brutal, hostile alien world where he has to fight for survival. He's a fish out of water, so to speak. He is the hunted on this world and not the hunter. And as I previously mentioned, this is the first time we've seen a predator as the protagonist of the film, and I loved it. I think that was fucking great. I'd always wondered how a predator film that had the predator as the central character would be. I thought that would be a real cool take rather than just have like the humans, rather than just have another predator film where the predator is basically a monster that the humans have to outwit and out-survive. I think this is the highlight of Predator Badlands, is having Dec as this character, and obviously having his ability to speak is also pretty cool because you really get to feel for the character. You get to see things from the Yautja point of view. It does a very good job of explaining and opening the door into Yautja culture and explaining how these creatures operate, what their motivations are, the obsession with honor, and this family clan code. So you can really understand where Dec is coming from. He wants to prove himself to get back into the clan, but he also wants revenge. And unlike other predators, he is not as big or as powerful as some of the predators we've seen in previous films. He's roughly about the size of an average man, which physically limits him compared to other predators, which have always been like 7 or 8 feet tall and have always towered over the humans. So he can't rely on just sheer size and strength. He also has to get smart. And this fuels his motivation and sets up this internal conflict he has going with him. And this is a big spoiler, so if you want to see the film, maybe stop listening now. He wants revenge for his brother, and that is a huge driving force of why he wants to survive and get back to his clan and prove that he isn't this worthless runt that his father and the rest of the clan thinks he is. So as our hero Dec makes his way through this very dangerous planet, he comes across Thea, played by Ellie Fanning. She's a Weyland-Yutani synth. She's been heavily damaged. She's pretty much been torn in half, and she's appears to be in the nest of some type of dragon vulture thing, or she's been tied up and left there. If she was put there by someone or something, kind of begs the question, who was it? Because you don't really find out. It doesn't look like she's been tied to like a root of an old tree, but Dec doesn't really seem too concerned by that. And it's a little bit of a plot hole, or maybe I just missed that. So the first interactions between these two are pretty fragile. Dec has been poisoned by some type of paralyzing dart. There's this cool scene where he's walking through a field with these disgusting looking puffer plants that shoot out these darts if you get too close to them. He needs her help because she knows what plant cures the paralysis. She's been torn in half, so she needs his help in order to travel and to make her way back to the Weyland-Yutani synth base that is on the other side of the planet. So both need each other physically, and as the film progresses, there's a bit more of a emotional and mental side of their partnership. But Thea isn't all that she appears to be. There is a very key scene where Thea reveals that she's not just a standard run-of-the-mill synth. She's been programmed to sympathize with the creatures she comes into contact with, so she can better understand how they work, what their needs are, and how they operate, rather than just treating everything like it is a monster, more or less. It's clear from when you first meet her, she isn't just any normal synth, and we've seen synths of all shapes and sizes at this point, and Ellie Fanning does a really good job of playing a synth. It's not something I ever thought I'd see her play, but she does a great job of it. And unlike Ash and some previous synthetics we've seen in the Alien franchise, she doesn't give away any psychotic vibes or that she might be a problem later on. She's a little overly friendly and courteous. That's about the only character flaw of hers. She is smart, and most of her decisions are based on logic. And it's clear from the first meeting that she is part of a bigger picture, and she wasn't just sent to the planet for routine exploration. So as Predator Badlands progresses, there's elements in it that are very reminiscent of the adventure buddy film. Deck and Thea traverse the brutal and harsh landscapes of Genna and go on all sorts of adventures. And unlike the previous Predator films, there isn't one lush jungle setting. Genna has a very diverse landscape. It's very mountainous in parts. Some parts are like a rainforest with picturesque creeks and waterfalls. Other parts of it are grassy and mountainous. Then there is the gigantic, what looks like a redwood forest, and the fields full of razor blade looking straw plants. And the terrain, like everything else we've seen in the film, is original. It definitely does its own thing and tries to separate itself from what at this point has become kind of a cliche of the Predator films, is always setting them in jungles or forests. The whole idea of the jungle Predator has definitely been shifted in this film. It's another element I've always wondered about in movies, is you have one successful film like Jurassic Park or Predator or Terminator, and it seems like every single film that follows copies the same formula or elements that made the first film successful. Predator, it's setting the hunter in a jungle with a team of mercenaries or something. As much as I like Predators, the concept was very cool, taking the most dangerous people on Earth and setting them in a game reserve on some alien planet somewhere. That was a very cool original idea, but it's still alien hunters hunting human predators in a jungle. And while it was a good film, and it does expand the mythology here and there, it does get a little repetitive. The Predator tried something completely different, and that fucked up. And that was a complete and utter disaster. It has elements of suburbia, which you never ever thought you'd ever see a Predator film set in. There's a whole high-tech lab setting, the military base, but that film still starts in a jungle, and you think, oh, okay, here we go again, it's going to be another Predator hunting down commandos in a jungle. Then it's transferred to some military lab, the suburbs, an urban setting, and then back to the woods, and it makes fucking no apparent sense. So it's taken elements of all the other Predator films and kind of cooked it up and tried to do something original. As bad as Alien vs. Predator was, it did something that no other Predator film has done before. It set a Predator film in the snow in Antarctica. And while it makes no sense why there would be Mayan pyramids underground in Antarctica, that Paul W.S. Anderson, all of his fucking video game films are like this. He did the same thing with Resident Evil, set it in some underground base built on top of a mansion. Why don't you just take the inspiration from the games rather than trying to redefine it and put it into some crappy underground lab? Because Alien vs. Predator would have made more sense if the pyramid was in the jungles of Mexico, if there were an ancient Mayan or Aztec pyramid complex that had aliens in it. But oh no, it was set underground in Antarctica. While that's original, it was just stupid. The Predator films are a little bit of an anomaly in some regards, because they either stick with the elements that made the first one so popular, or they try to do their own thing and it fails miserably. Like with Alien vs. Predator Requiem, in the scenes in the forest, in the town, pretty much small town Colorado, in the sewer, in the hospital, that was just fucking stupid. The big fight on the hospital rooftop with the Pred alien and the Predator, the Wolf Predator. So I do really respect that Trachtenberg has tried to do something completely different, and I think that does really translate in those opening scenes on Yautja Prime. It's a very different Predator homeworld than I think a lot of people were probably expecting. It's this arid Western style environment, which does make sense. It makes sense why they would choose this as their home base or their hunting ground. And as Trachtenberg has been quoted as saying, he sees the Yautja as a nomadic culture, and that also gives opportunity to move the locations around and change them up a bit in future films. But I think the Yautja homeworld does suit that, just the brutality of the whole ethos of the Predator. But I would also like to see pyramids and rivers of lava again at some point. That was probably the only decent part of Alien vs Predator Requiem, was the scene where the wolf is in his chair and he gets the call to go clean up another mess. And talking about the expansion of the Predator mythology and culture, over the course of this film, it does a very good job of giving us more insights into how Yautja culture really works, the code of honor, clan dynamics, that sense that you have to be initiated into the clan and how important that is to Dek. For about the first half of the film, he's pretty much obsessed with being accepted back into this clan and getting revenge and proving himself. And that's what Trachtenberg does really well in this film. He intentionally gives us these little small nuggets of how Yautja culture and society operate. He gives enough nuggets out to the audience to keep the emotional stakes really high and to make it a really interesting and engaging story. Even though Dek's reasons for wanting to be accepted into a clan do seem a bit extreme, it's explained very well so you can see his point of view. Dek wants revenge for his brother. He wants to be accepted into his clan. He wants to earn his cloak so he can, quote unquote, feel like a real predator and be accepted. But the physical limitations he has, he's too small. He's the runt, which is a cool element because we haven't really seen a small predator. They're all pretty much been giants until this point. That was a really cool element, and you can really sympathize with him and see why he wants to be accepted into a clan. But at the same time, Thea is the perfect counterbalance to Dek's code-driven brutality and his obsession with this clan hierarchy. She is more of the emotional, logical center. The more the film goes on, the more Dek comes to realize that this outcast persona that has been weighing him down isn't as big of a curse as he believes it to be. Because as Thea explains to him, you can create your own clan out of being an outcast, because you're not the only outcast in the universe. And as the film progresses, there's a really cool and key scene that highlights the balance between Dek and Thea. Dek is explaining what the Yautja view to be a alpha predator, the predator that has killed the most formidable prey. In other words, the one that has the most skulls and the most prestige. And Thea balances that out by explaining on Earth, an alpha predator, such as the alpha wolf, isn't the leader of a pack because they've killed the most prey. They're the alpha because they protect the pack. The alpha wolf, like a silverback gorilla or lion, protects the clan or the pack. The others do the hunting and the groundwork. They sit back and protect the pack and keep the balance of the hierarchy, or something to that effect. But after Thea has explained to him what the various definitions of an alpha predator actually are, he starts to think a little differently about what he believes an alpha predator to be. He's been brought up to believe that an alpha predator is one thing, where there are different versions of this all around the universe, or something along those lines. So Thea's backstory deepens. This is explained through a couple of backstory scenes. It's unclear how long she has been on Genna or how long the mission is supposed to be, but it's very clear that Weyland-Yutani has a interest in Genna. They obviously want some of the wildlife or bioweapons research, because that seems to be the main directive of Weyland-Yutani, is they want the most dangerous organisms in the world for the bioweapons research division, which also fits in with Alien Earth, which I have yet to finish. I kind of forgot about that show. There's definitely more to Thea than meets the eye. She has this interest in the ecosystem, and she doesn't seem to be a toe-the-line corporate synth either. She seems to have her own conscience, for a lack of a better word. There's more to the planet than just providing resources for Weyland-Yutani or the most dangerous prey in the universe for the Yautja. Having said that, Trachtenberg does do a very good job of showing the duality to Thea's character. Like I previously mentioned, she doesn't give away too many cues that she's going to do an Ash and go all psychotic and try to kill Dek or anything like that. She's very nice, logical, and she's very empathetic, which is the counterbalance to Deck's character. And she's more than just a robot sidekick. And she's not quite as dependable as she might seem. There's far more going on with Thea than she lets on. But having said that, there's a little bit of distrust with her. I didn't fully trust her, because you know there's going to be some conflict down the track, but it was very hard to put your finger on. Was she just trying to manipulate Deck in order to get another specimen for the Weyland-Yutani bioweapons department? Or does she have another agenda altogether? Right throughout the film, there are some great action scenes. When Deck lands on the planet and he's attacked by these mutant Day of the Triffid-like vines, he loses a lot of his weapons and is forced to survive purely on his laser sword. And Bo, the laser sword thing is a fucking cool addition to the Predator arsenal. We've seen plasma cannons, Xena throwing discs, the classic wrist blades, the nuclear bomb, the net launcher, the spear. He has most of these things in the film, but they're limited because a lot of them get lost pretty early on, so he's forced to rely on the sword. He's a very good swordsman. The bow and arrow was a nice new addition too, with the laser string and the laser arrow it fires out. He doesn't use the wrist blades very much. I'm pretty sure he loses them pretty early into the film, or they're damaged in the opening fight or something like that. There's the acid-like grenade bomb thing, which is another cool addition. And of course there's the classic Predator weapons that we've become accustomed to over the years, the shoulder cannon, which he doesn't use a hell of a lot because that's lost early on. It's also the first Predator film where the Predator doesn't really rely on cloaking because Deck hasn't earned it yet, so he can't just turn invisible and get out of harm's way. He basically has to fight for survival like some of the human characters have in previous films. There's a cool scene that tips the cap to the other Predator injury sequences. Deck has to make a bandage out of a piece of his skirt, and he's crushing up plants to make as a paste. He's injecting himself with something as well. In the original Predator, when the Predator's wounded, he makes the medicine out of the plants and what he's got lying around. In Predator 2, where he uses bits of drywall and turns them into some type of fucking jelly paste shit to put on the wound. Then he comes across this explosive bug thing, which was really cool. It kind of inflates, and you know something's going to happen with it, and these red ball things inflate, and then he throws it and it explodes. So just when you think he's got 5 minutes of peace where he's sitting down in this creek trying to tend to his wounds, there's another element of danger that gets introduced. There's a few more scenes that pay homage to the previous Predator films, specifically the first one. He cuts a bunch of vines and makes a sling backpack thing to carry Thea on. He more or less turns her into a talking backpack, and now he's got eyes in the back of his head. Because she isn't in one way at all. She can help him, but she also clearly has an agenda, so he hasn't quite worked out that he might be being played by this half a synth, that there is some type of ulterior motive to it. It's obvious that she does want something, and she isn't being 100% honest. So going back to the backpack scene, so he cuts a bunch of vines and turns them into a backpack, which is very reminiscent of Arnold in Predator when he's cutting the vines to make the trap for the Predator in the montage scene when he's bending the sticks that he makes into a bow and arrow. There's a scene where he does something similar. He's bending some sticks. He's making tools. There's another scene later on where he does a similar thing, which is a direct tip of the cap to the original Predator films, which I liked. It was a cool role reversal too. The Predator is the one that has to improvise. He can't just rely on his advanced technology and weapons to get him out of the situation. He has to rely on his wits as well. Another character I haven't mentioned yet is the cute little green wrecking ball known as Bud. Bud shows up in the razor grass scene. He's been following the pair for a while before he approaches them. He turns into a ball and cuts a path through the grass and helps in taking down the bone bison creature. It's a very cool scene. Some great visual effects, great action. Deke jumps from tree to tree in classic Predator style. He cuts down a tree and more or less rides it. until it comes crashing down on top of the bison. When I first saw Bud in the trailer, I was a little concerned because, after all, Disney does own the rights to Predator now and Alien. And they've already come up with an Alien children's book about the cat. God knows what they're going to do with Predator. And that's a big concern when Fox sold the rights to Disney. And when I saw Bud, I thought, oh no, they're cutesifying Predator. We have this young runt Predator that looks a little different to the typical ugly-looking Predator. And now we've got this cutesy little green creature that they can market to kids so they can sell toys. I can picture Bud toys being on sale at Disneyland. My big reservations are where they've made this creature too cute looking. They've made him look innocent and cute to appeal to the kids. And that was a big concern of mine. I thought, oh fuck no. Is there any franchise that Disney hasn't tainted? Because Disney will try to cutesify everything in order to sell merchandise and make endless sequels marketed at kids. And when I first saw Bud, I thought, is this Disney trying to do the same thing here? Now, fortunately, Bud isn't too cute or overused. There's a cool scene around the campfire when they're cooking the bone bison and he's wanting some meat from Deke. Thea is offered the meat instead, where she explains, I think someone else might like that. He did participate on the hunt. There is a cool, kind of cute scene where Bud starts to copy Deke. He starts copying his movements and tries to be like him before spitting on him, marking him as one of his own. So getting these little hints that there is something more to these characters and that this cute little green creature isn't quite what it seems, just like everything else in this film. You have this other outcast creature that is marking Deke as being a part of its clan, which is ultimately what Deke wanted all along. The only difference is he doesn't really recognize this creature. It's more of an annoyance to him at this stage of the film. The next morning when Deke and Thea head off, they leave Bud asleep at the camp, and he disappears for a little while. So as the film progresses, our heroes venture on through the dangerous landscapes of Genna. Deke comes across the Cassilic den. There's a bunch of destroyed and melted Weyland-Yutani vehicles. Deke takes Thea into one of these vehicles where she is reunited with her lower half and tries to reattach her legs. And this is where Thea, and this is a big spoiler, and this is where Thea reveals her true motivations to Deke. She informs Deke that she has called her twin synthetic sister Tessa. Tessa is like an evil version of Thea. When we first meet Tessa, she's been pretty badly damaged by the Cassilisk. The synths try to capture the Cassilisk because Deke isn't the only one interested in this poor mysterious creature. Weyland-Yutani want it for the bioweapons division as well. And this is how Thea comes to be separated with her lower half. Now, Tessa gets put back together. She has some type of memory update or something, and she pretty much goes evil. She's got a wonky eye. She's got different coloured hair to Thea. So it's very clear which synthetic is which. She's a typical evil corporate android we've seen in the previous Alien films. She's got an agenda. She's working for Mother. Mother's very mysterious. She gives her the orders that she wants to capture the Yautja and the Cassilisk for the corporation and puts a lot of pressure on her to fulfill her mission. And this is where we get a lot more background to the corporate plot. Weyland-Yutani is interested in the planet because of the wildlife, as I mentioned before, and wants to harness it for their own nefarious purposes. More or less the same storyline we've seen play out in the Alien films, specifically Alien Romulus and Alien Earth. There's quite a few synthetics in this film too. There's more synths than any other Alien or Predator film we've seen. There appears to be hundreds of them at this research facility. They're all pretty suspicious looking. They've all got dodgy haircuts, and they're about the only human form you see in the film. Because like I said before, there is no humans in this film, just synthetics. And the synths are on the trail of Deke and are following the trail back to the Cassilisk den. So the synths are cutting their way through Genna. They're shooting and burning everything along the way. and they're not particularly nice. A majority of the synths look like combat synths, but with some very questionable haircuts. They're not exactly the most intimidating looking synths either. They look more like extras from Twilight than from any Alien film. Once Thea informs Deke that her sister is on the way, which is also another cool original concept, because you have these two synths that are pretty much identical in appearance. One's been programmed with more empathy so she can understand the environment, and the other one has no empathy, just logic, and is all about the mission and fulfilling corporate orders. That was another cool element. You've got this duality on these two very similar characters. They even talk and move differently. Ellie Fanning does a great job at playing both of these characters and defining their individual personalities. There's also the other obvious duality to these characters, is when we first meet them, they're both pretty damaged. They've both come off second best to the Casilisk. Thea's been bitten in half, but her memory, her brain, for lack of a better word, is still intact. Where Tessa, on the other hand, is intact, but her mind and memory have been damaged. She also has a wonky eye, which is a bit of a giveaway that something isn't quite right with her. And Trachtenberg does something very clever. He leaves it deliberately ambiguous whether Tessa was always like this, or is it because she has this update from Mother, or if her personality was changed, or because of the memory damage, because they say she should be boxed up and sent back for analysis or something like that. So Dek's been informed that the sister's on the way, but he chooses to stick around and take down his grand prize of the Casilisk. He sets a trap for it, which is another nod to the Predator films, because it's always a human like Adrian Brody or Arnold Schwarzenegger that sets the trap for the Predator. Adrian Brody has the fire ring, Arnold has the big bonfire he lights, and Deke uses the fuel from the Weyland-Yutani vehicles to set up a big fire ring to draw the Casilisk out. So the battle ensues. There's some great visual effects, some great monster action. And this is also another first for the Predator franchise. This is the first time we've seen a Predator take on something that isn't a Predator or a human or an alien. It takes on essentially another giant extraterrestrial beast. But it's around this time we find out that the Casilisk doesn't go down easy and can't be killed. And unfortunately for Deke, he keeps trying to take down his prize, but it is ultimately pointless. Thea's sister Tessa arrives. They both get frozen and taken as property of Weyland-Yutani Corporation. And for a brief moment, Thea gets her legs back before the Casilisk damages the vehicle she's in and she loses her legs again. So now she's left to fend for herself again. Tessa finds her and the two sisters are reunited. And there's a very cool scene involving the transport vehicle back to the synth headquarters. They're doing experiments on the Predator, trying to figure out what it is. Because Tessa has the corporation's prize, she has a Yautja specimen that they can exploit. Thea tries to convince Tessa that this is wrong, and this is where she has this moral conundrum. Does she help Dek, who has helped her so far? She does have a bit of a guilty conscience, even if she is a machine. She has led Deke into this trap. But she can also see that her sister isn't quite the same as she remembers. And she's just a pawn carrying out the orders of this mysterious corporation. And that's another thing that's really clever about this film, is you never really find out what Weyland-Yutani is up to, apart from collecting specimens or samples for the bioweapons department. Their motivations remain very mysterious. Tessa doesn't quite get what she wants out of Deke, so she instructs one of the synths to keep extracting the information to find out how these devices work. She has found the Predator ship that crash landed, and she's got some of Deke's weapons and trinkets, one of which is a children's toy. Deke and Thea can communicate with each other. They can understand each other because she obviously knows what the Yautja is saying. They have this conversation about getting out. There's a guard there who's inquiring, what is this thing? Deke says it's a children's toy, but tell him it's a map and how to operate it. The only criticism about this scene I'd say is, why didn't the other synth know what he was saying, unless they haven't been programmed to know what Yautja is saying? Seems pretty likely if you go into a planet like that where you might encounter known extraterrestrial species like the Predator, all the synths would know at least what they're saying. They'd have the language fucking app in their head or something. The synth is playing around with the children's toy. He presses a couple of buttons, and there's a really funny scene from the other side of the door where his head explodes, and Thea goes, "That's a children's toy?" To which Dick responds, "That's a Yautja children's toy." Now this is where Thea makes his choice to help Deke and really go against her sister and the corporation. She makes this moral choice to stick with Deke. She has helped him, he has helped her. The relationship has been tested, but now it has been amended. She helps Deke escape, which causes a lot of conflict with Tessa, who has her boxed up and more or less decommissioned, to have sent back to base. But before that happens, she activates the bottom half of her leg. She's got these little implant things on the top half and the bottom half, so her legs literally stand up in the crashed Weyland-Yutani vehicle and walk or run back to the synth base, which was pretty funny and very weird to see just legs walking by themselves. But all the moral parables Thea has bestowed upon Deke have sunk in, because Deke, like every good Predator film, gears up for the final conflict and the final big action sequence. If you can hear a noise in the background, that is the rain. It is pouring outside, much the same way as it was on the last podcast I recorded. Coincidentally enough, that's actually never happened to me twice in a row before. Deke makes some armor out of the bone bison and some of the native wildlife. He substitutes his plasma cannon for one of the acid-spitting eel things. There was a scene earlier in the film where Thea explains to him that not everything is out to kill you. Some things just want food. You can entice and pretty much manipulate the environment around you if you understand it a little better, rather than trying to kill it and run from it. The eel's favourite food is these little black ball things that look like caviar. So Deke keeps a couple of them and trains this eel to spit acid on command pretty much, which is a cool substitute for the plasma cannon. So Deke gears up for war. He plans on breaking into the synth base to rescue his companion and the Casilisk, because as it is revealed, the Casilisk isn't the big bad beast that Deke thinks it is. His little green friend, Bud, is a baby Casilisk, and the creature that he's been trying to kill the entire film is its mother. He tries to rescue it on behalf of Bud and right a few of the wrongs along the way. And this is a really cool scene too, because there's so much character development in Deke. He goes from a young Yautja wanting redemption and revenge and to be accepted into this clan, to realizing the value of teamwork and friendship, and completely doing a 180 on his beliefs. He's a completely different Yautja with a different mindset at this point in the film as he was at the start of it. Thea has taught him a lot, Bud has taught him a lot, and he's learnt a lot in this place of death. And what he wanted at the start of the film is not what he wants at the end of the film. And it was a very clever way of turning the protagonist, the Predator that wants revenge and trophies, into a fully fleshed out moral hero of the story. And Dick is the hero of this tale. He's not the traditional orthodox hero, he's anything but. But this is a very cool way to make this a more moral and grounded character. It also makes Dick a hell of a lot more easier to sympathise with, because you can understand his conflictions. This was a very clever element to the film, because the audience can sympathise with Deke a lot easier. If he was just a one-dimensional character, I don't think he'd be as compelling, because you're rooting for him in the entire film, even though he wants to kill this creature he's never even seen before, just because it will bring him glory among the clan. Before I found out the big secret with the Casilisk, I was kind of thinking, why does he want to go to all this effort to kill something he doesn't even know what it looks like? All for this vain attempt at glory, so he might be accepted into his clan, which ultimately that was probably never going to happen, because he's the runt of the litter, and it's pretty clear early on in the film that his father doesn't really like him. And if the father was willing to do what he did to the older brother, Deke is probably going to end up the same way. But because there is this very clever redemption story to Deke's character, it makes him a lot more likeable and a lot more easy to relate to. So Deke and Bud sneak into the synth compound and cut their way through the synths. Some of the action scenes involving the synths are pretty violent. There's a lot of head smashing and stomping and acid being spat into synths' faces and chests and watching them erode and melt in front of each other. There's a cool scene where the acid eel spits acid at this synth's chest and it pretty much just melts straight through it, and the top half implodes into the bottom half, and he ends up a sparking, melting pile of goo. Thea's trapped in this box. She's been decommissioned. I think one of the synths opens the box, or I think she activates herself, and she's playing asleep or deactivated. She's reunited with her legs, which was a funny scene. Deke is carving his way through synthetics. The Casilisk is being loaded up onto a Weyland transport ship to be taken off the planet, back to corporate headquarters. Tessa catches wind of what's going on and gets in the gigantic power loader, which was really cool and an obvious throwback to Aliens. This power loader is the power loader, but on steroids. It's designed to carry giant cargo containers. It's actually pretty cool. It was very well designed, I thought. It's in that classic yellow colour from Aliens and wouldn't be too out of place in Avatar either. It's got these big gripping prong things in the front of it and a big circular saw on the other hand. The only difference this time around, besides the size, is it's got this enclosed cockpit on it. There's a safety glass thing you can pull down, which would have come in really handy in Aliens. So now Thea's got her legs back. They try to make their way onto the ship to free the Casilisk, and Bud dresses up as a Weyland-Yutani synth. The synths also wear these black suits with this black hooded cloak. Very reminiscent how David dresses in Alien Covenant. Makes the synths look more creepy, I think. So Deke has set a trap for the army of synths coming his way. He's cut a good amount of them to pieces with the help of the acid-spitting snake. He takes out the rest of the synthetics, which brings us to the big showdown with Deke and the power loader. So these two go at it. The fight is pretty cool. Tessa has the obvious upper hand. Deke is getting his ass kicked when the Casilisk steps in to take revenge on Tessa. The battle continues, and obviously Deke and co are victorious. Thea has to make a choice to save her friend, Deke, or side with the evil corporate synth sister. The Casilisk is unfortunately frozen and destroyed this time around, which was probably the saddest part of the film too, because it gets frozen and kind of explodes, and you get a shot of a very upset Bud, which was surprisingly emotional. I wasn't expecting to get that emotional in a Predator film, but ultimately the corporate synth has just destroyed this thing's mother. It was going to exploit it for the corporation and for profit, and really it was the innocent creature that both parties wanted. The Casilisk didn't really do anything to anyone else. Deke wanted it for glory, and the corporation wanted it for profit. So the final climactic battle is not all about the action. There's a bigger meaning to it. It feels very personal, especially for Deke. It's the culmination of his entire character arc over the course of the film. Thea as well. It also expands the larger Predator mythos as well. It's not just a fight for glory or trophies, but a reckoning for Deke. And I really did appreciate that. It wasn't just a fight between the Predator and his last prey. Deke is a well-fleshed and thought-out character, as opposed to the antagonist or just a monster. He is not the same young, outcast Yautja warrior as he was at the start of the film. And this is where his story really goes full circle. It's taken him until this point in the film to realise that he was always part of a clan. This outcast motley crew made up of a torn-in-half synthetic Thea, a strange alien creature, Bud, and himself. And in a way, this is the best revenge Deke could have gotten. He proves to his clan, but more importantly himself, that he can survive, he's worthy of the Yautja title, but probably most importantly, he has proven that he doesn't need a vain trophy like the skull of some alien creature to prove that he is a leader, which he proves when he goes back to save Thea and Bud's mother. So the trio leave Gina and head back for Yautja Prime, where he confronts his father. This is a very cool scene. The Predator Elder is unmasked, and he takes his vengeance upon his father. There's some out-of-focus predators in the background in the big clan tent, which looks like a nomadic tent you'd find on Earth. He comes back with Thea and the rapidly growing Bud. Bud has turned into a young Cassilisk. So in a way, he's got a pretty formidable team. He's got the very sympathetic and smart Thea acting as the brains. He's got the Cassilisk as the muscle and the creature that can't be killed, and himself. So he comes back, gives the trophy of Thea's sister Tessa's synthetic skull. The father doesn't really believe that he's gone on the hunt or faced the Cassilisk, and still refuses to accept him in the clan. This isn't really much of a surprise because we kind of knew this was going to happen because the father's a bit of a prick and was never going to accept him. But either way, this doesn't stop Deke from getting his revenge on his father. There's a cool fight, and he finally gets his cloak, which brings us to the end of the film. There's a cool post-credit scene where Thea says, "Are they friends of yours?" Another ship approaches from the dusty plains, to which Deke replies, "No, that's Mother." So I'm hoping there's going to be a Predator Badlands sequel, and we finally might get to see the female Predator. That'd be pretty fucking cool. I've seen it in comic books and artworks and stuff, but it'd be good to see the theatrical female Predator, because that's one thing we have never seen in a Predator film either. They've always been male, and maybe a Predator child, but I just don't want them to do the Disney thing and make it all cute and likable so they can sell toys, and they get kids interested in Predator, so they have to make it so they can dial back the brutality and make it more kid-friendly. The other Predator films have always shied away from doing anything too cute or making anything look too Disney-esque or soft-looking. Everything's always been spiky and abrasive and brutal. Even those weird Predator dogs from the Predator look like they're from the Predator world, even though they've never really been mentioned before, and they're kind of more or less a gimmick, because there was that one gets brain damage and becomes friends with one of the characters in it. It's fucking stupid, that film. So Trachtenberg definitely leaves the door open for a Badlands sequel, and I hope there's going to be one. I got to do a review on Prey next. I love that film. I've been meaning to see it again, because that was the most original Predator film since the first one. Even though it does follow some traditional pathways, having it set in a forest and having characters being stalked and taken out one by one, it is very original, and it's new blood the franchise desperately needed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Trachtenberg has in store for a Predator Badlands sequel. I'm hoping it's not going to be too long. I look forward to it. And that brings an end to Predator Badlands. So all in all, I really enjoyed the film. This is the first theatrically released Predator film since The Predator in 2018. And due to that film being a complete and utter joke, that is a big reason why Prey never was released in the theatres. And that was an absolute travesty, because that film deserved to be seen on the big screen. So all in all, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the sequels. I loved how it expanded the mythology, inverted the Predator film, did something different, made the Predator the protagonist, expanded the mythology, and brought something new to the table. So all in all, I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars. It was one of the films I was looking forward to the most this year, and it didn't disappoint. And it's really got me interested in the world of Predator again. It's been one of my favourite franchises for a long time, and it's really rekindled my love of the franchise. So while I was watching the film, I kept thinking, where the fuck did they film this? It looks familiar, minus all the alien landscapes and CG backgrounds. But despite all the visual effects, there was a lot of practical filming as well. I kind of knew I'd seen this location before, and I had to double check when I got home where it was filmed. There's a couple of shots in the film that were very familiar. There's a few shots that were very reminiscent of another very big film franchise, and it's a place I've been to before, and that was New Zealand. Yautja Prime could have been all green screen for all I know. I don't think that was a real location, but Genna's diverse, rugged landscapes were definitely New Zealand. Especially some of the shots in the mountains with the grasslands below. It looked very much like Rohan. And if you've seen Lord of the Rings, you'll definitely be able to pick some of the locations they used. Some of the rainforests in it looked like Endor or places in the United States, but the whole film was shot in New Zealand. Again, it was a nice contrast to the dusty western type landscape of Yautja Prime. What would be really cool in future sequels if they could expand Yautja Prime? That'd be really cool if it had different environments. Maybe it has different clans that come from different parts of the planet. One could be jungle, one could be dry and arid. That could be a cool element to play around with. But making the Yautja nomadic, moving around from hunt to hunt, was also a very clever idea to add to the world of Predator, because it doesn't tie the clan or the tribe to a single home planet. They can move around from planet to planet wherever the hunt takes them. It's these and other elements that Trachtenberg has brought to the Predator franchise that has made it a lot more interesting. It's fleshed out the mythology a lot more, and it's breathing new life into a franchise that is, nearly 40 years old at this point. And besides giving the franchise new life, it's also given it new directions to go in as well. So let's talk about the overall design of Predator Badlands, the Yautja design, as well as the voice and the language. So overall, I did like Deck's appearance, because they don't really try to hide the fact that he doesn't wear a mask. In the trailer, I think there's 1 or 2 shots where he's wearing the face mask. For a majority of the trailer, he doesn't have the mask, and you can see his face pretty clearly. When I first saw the face, I thought, oh, he looks too young, he looks a bit too, pretty to be a Predator. He doesn't have this quills coming out of the eyebrows, and he looks a bit too clean cut, for lack of a better word, to be a Predator. But I think that was the obvious point. But the more I saw it, the more I got accustomed to it. I think the big thing that really threw me was the digital mandibles, because we're so used to seeing the more practical mandibles, and seeing the digital ones this time around, they moved completely differently. It wasn't a bad thing. I thought, yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. That's a cool element to bring. It might take a little adjusting to get used to, but that makes more sense if you're going to have a Predator that talks. It'd be a hell of a lot easier to animate the face and the mandibles moving while it talked digitally than it would be if it was practical effects. And according to Dan Trachtenberg, Deke's Yautja look was a deliberate mix of practical and digital effects. Weta Workshop worked on the facial effects as well as the suit. The suit was practical, but the face is more expressive digitally, which obviously gives Deke a lot more expression in the face and makes these expressions a lot more emotionally nuanced. So let's talk about the Predator language. Like I mentioned before, this is the first time we've had a speaking Predator, and I don't think it's at all that over the top or shocking. I mean, who said the Predators can't talk? Because so far we've only ever seen the Predator work alone or in small groups. Predator hunting by himself is probably not going to talk to himself. We know the Predator does mimic, and in the end of the second film, where the Elder chucks the flintlock pistol to Danny Glover and says, "Take it," we know the Predator can talk. So it's not that shocking that Predators do have their own language. And I actually thought this was a very cool addition to the film, because it makes them a more fleshed out species. And as I mentioned before, it's pretty hard to have a protagonist that doesn't really say anything. A lot of thought did go into the planning and structure of the Yautja language. The linguist Paul Fromer, he was the guy that worked with James Cameron to create the Na'vi language for Avatar. So he recommended Trachtenberg bring on a linguist to help build and structure the Yautja language. Britton Watkins was the language expert and linguist brought on board to help structure and build the Yautja language. According to him, the language is structured in an opposite form to English. In other words, it's the reverse of English. A sentence structure starts with the objective first, the verb in the middle, and the subject last, which is interesting. I have to credit ChatGPT for this part, because it's provided me an example of Yautja language and how it is pronounced. The example it gave me was the first person pronoun I and me are both chish-ish in Yautja depending on position. Interesting. So a lot of time and effort has gone into creating this Predator language. It's not just about growls and clicks. You can't have language without voice or speech. And I really love the sound of the Predators talking. It's brutal. It's kind of scary. They have pretty intimidating voices. But there's also a lot of expression and weight and meaning behind what they say. And like I've mentioned numerous times already, Deke is the protagonist. This is the first Predator film we've had with the Predator as the protagonist, and having the speech and the weight and the meaning behind the words helps humanize the character. And he's not just talking for the sake of the movie-going audience, he's also communicating a lot about Yautja culture and how the society works, which was another really cool way of inserting bits of the Predator mythology into the story without having to get weighed down with numerous backstory scenes or overly drawn out scenes of Deke trying to explain why the Predators do what they do. It's all tied into the speech and the language. One of the biggest thrills for me was the expansion of the Predator mythology and what that could mean for the franchise overall. Yautja culture has been dramatically expanded. Badlands significantly deepens the Predator lore and has expanded the Predator universe and where future Predator stories might go. That expansion has also brought with it a complete redefinement of the Predator as a character and as a cinematic monster. The Predator isn't just a blood-hungry movie monster anymore. It's not just chasing humans through a jungle for the sake of collecting trophies or killing aliens for the sake of a crossover franchise. We see a very well thought out and planned society with its own hierarchy, traditions, clan culture, society, and now language. We also see a society that has its own internal conflicts, whereby outcasts are exiled to planets in order to prove themselves to earn their way back into a clan. This is a quote from Trachtenberg. He said, he didn't want this to become a, quote, Senate Trade Committee movie, but he did want a meaningful glimpse into Yautja life. And I think Predator Badlands does that perfectly. It gives you just enough expansion of the mythology and the lore of Predator to keep you on the hook and wanting more without making the entire movie just about that and getting bogged down in politics or ultra nerdy, drawn out scenes about Yautja culture and tradition. It gives you that sprinkled throughout the film, and it does it usually in very quick, meaningful ways that get you very interested and keep you on the hook wanting to know more, but it also leaves you satisfied at the end of the film. In Trachtenberg's other Predator film, Killer of Killers, we get a pretty good look at Yautja Prime, which has been carried over into this film, which is also a really good way to expand the Predator franchise even further, is by making more of the animated films. It wasn't my favourite in the Predator franchise, but they were pretty good. I'm not an overly huge fan of animation, but it is a very effective way of making more Predator stories and getting them out there, rather than having to wait a couple of years for another big budget movie. I think it's also a good way to expand the story arcs of Predators throughout human history. Maybe we could have a Spartan or Roman Predator movie next. You could have one in Vietnam. The possibilities are endless. One of the biggest achievements of Predator Badlands is the inversion of the classic and at this point worn out hunter versus hunted story arc that we've seen play out in numerous Predator films before. A core theme of Predator Badlands is the Predator has now found himself the prey. He's found himself stuck on a planet where he can be prey or at least threatened by the wildlife and factors outside of the clan conflict. And Trachtenberg frames this as an inversion. The Yautja, often hunters, are now vulnerable in unfamiliar territory. And that comes from Bloody Disgusting. Another aspect of the film I really did like is that of legacy and honour. Deke's quest is not just physical, but it's also deeply cultural. His exile, his fight, his relationship with Thea and his brother, all of this is framed around the Yautja Code of Honour. This choice cements the Predator mythology as more than just gore and violence. It's about sacrifice, identity, and clan tradition. And if you can hear that, it is pouring with rain again. If we look back over the course of, 5, 6 Predator films, We have seen a very distinct evolution of the hunt and the hunter. The Predator films have evolved and come a long way since the 1987 original, which sees a mysterious alien hunting a group of muscled-up commandos in the jungle. And the real genius of the first Predator is it is very much a hybrid film. It starts off as one thing and it ends as something completely differently. And that's its real genius. It starts off with this group of muscled-up commandos going into the jungle to track down a missing CIA analyst or something like that who goes missing in the jungle. It starts off as the hunters hunting down the bad guys, and then about halfway through the film, the hunters become the hunted, and then it turns into this like hybrid slasher chase film through the jungle. And over the course of several Predator films, the locations have changed. The franchise has undergone some pretty big ups and downs and changes. Predators is just another take on Predator. I did like Predators. It cops a lot of shit, that film, but I think it's one of the better films in the franchise. It takes that Predator format, except you have the most dangerous assassins and psychopaths and mercenaries on the planet all transported to a game reserve to be hunted by this new group of predators, not just a predator. It does expand the mythology, but it doesn't really go deep enough. It leaves a lot of open-ended questions. But I think the plan was to make a sequel, but ultimately I don't think it did that well, which was a shame because the sequel probably would have been really good. I think Robert Rodriguez was supposed to direct Predators, but he ended up producing because he was making something else at the time. But if he had made the sequel, that would have been awesome. It's a franchise and a monster that has evolved into something much more real and complex than just a brutal, fishnet-wearing, giant dreadlocked, skinning, slashing, spine-ripping ET that we all know and love. And to get a bit more background on the evolution of the Predator and how it's changed from the antagonist to the protagonist, I found an interesting article on GameRant.com titled Predator Badlands, How Does a Yautja Protagonist Change the Franchise? It's by Joshua Kristen McCoy, published April 5th, 2025. The Predator franchise is something of an odd presence in the modern blockbuster scene. If the original 1987 film had hit theaters in the 2020s, it might have strung together a successful series on the back of an excellent premise. Instead, it came out in the 80s and stumbled into several dodgy sequels. That's very true. Often with decades of intervening time. That's also true. Was it the first one came out in 87? Was it the second one came out in 1990 or 1991? The next Predator film was Alien vs. Predator in, was it 2004, 2003? Requiem comes out, 2006, 2007? And the next proper Predator film, Predators, comes out in 2010. Then the next Predator film doesn't come out until 2018. And then Prey in, 2022? And now Badlands. In Prey, the series seems to have found its step again, leading into the upcoming 7th entry, Badlands. Unlike its predecessors, Badlands will allegedly follow one of the franchise's titular Yautja hunters breaking the race from its usual villain role. That alteration would break new ground for the long-running series in many ways. Disney owns both Predator and Alien franchises, though it seems like the folks who collect paychecks from Disney are less involved in making these movies, and thank fucking God for that. And hopefully they stay out of the Predator and Alien franchises permanently and just leave the creative control to the people making the films. They just have the rights when they snag 20th Century Fox, adding them to the pile with the other million big name franchises they own, which is a massive issue that's wrong with the world today, is one company can just own everything. And is a massive pain in the ass, especially when that company seems to own all the IPs that you grew up with and love. Their treatment of Alien has been questionable. I'll also agree with that. Leaving Predator in a bizarre place for potential peril. If Badlands turns out to be a shockly mess of callbacks with very good special effects, but no real substance, fans will probably have the pattern down. And thankfully Dan Trachtenberg doesn't do this. The film is great. It does have some good special effects in it, but the visual effects aren't the main focus of the film, the story is, and this complete inversion of the role of the Predator. And as I've mentioned 100 times, it breaks new ground and definitely expands the mythology of the Predator franchise. The Yautja species has appeared in 5 canonical movies so far, and each one has portrayed some or all of them as the film's antagonist. The lone exception is Alien vs. Predator, in which a Yautja hunter comes to save the wayward humans from the onslaught of xenomorphs. They take on a similar role in the sequel, though they're still a threat to the protagonist. In none of these cases is the titular Predator the main protagonist of the story. They're the threat to be outwitted, the monster hiding in the trees or the enemy that will almost certainly kill most of the cast. Predator Badlands, along with at least a couple of human characters, will introduce an outcast Yautja as one of its primary protagonists. This raises a lot of questions about how that new Predator might be portrayed. As a pariah from his native society, the Badlands Yautja could bring a new spin to the species, adding a touch of nuance to a race that has almost always been impossibly straightforward. And this is written before the film came out. Deke definitely adds a very nuanced touch to the Predator franchise as well. The Predators have been the denizens of a planet of hats since the early days, and a new direction could spice them up. However, it also interacts interestingly with the history of the franchise. Badlands puts an interesting spin on the first Predator. The clever trick of John McTiernan's original 1987 Predator is that it starts firmly in one genre before ramping off into another one entirely. Save for its spoiler-adjacent opening shot, one could watch the first act of Predator utterly convinced that it's a sequel to Commando or any other Schwarzenegger action masterwork. Very true. John McTiernan is a massively underrated director. He directed Die Hard and Die Hard with a Vengeance and some other great nostalgic classic action films. He's entirely right. That is a real genius of the original Predator. It starts off as one thing, as he says. It could be the sequel to Commando or any 80s action film for that matter. Then halfway through it changes into this complete other genre and turns the whole film on its head. A group of hilariously macho military men take to Central America with enough guns to clear out the jungle and immediately set to work doing just that. The tone only changes when they realize they aren't the most capably violent being in the ecosystem. Then and only then does the Yautja pop up and start picking off the soldiers. It's a sci-fi slasher from that moment on, shifting the positions of the protagonists several rungs down the power ladder in order to create tension in place of catharsis. Very interesting and well-worded way to describe Predator. Putting the Predator front and center offers two potential spins on this twist. The obvious trick might be to start with the slasher tone before shifting toward something more action-focused, revising that power balance shift would be an interesting commentary on the character and its role. Alternatively, the heroic Yautja might follow a similar shift toward desperation as they rebel against their native society. It's a compelling take on the material anyway. Badlands is playing into a common horror franchise trope. The incredible law of horror franchises is that every entry tends to become more about the antagonist and less about the heroes. Those few franchises that do have iconic survivors tend to lose them in subsequent installments. Yeah, Scream's a definite victim of that, and I suppose Halloween as well. Not that I've really ever seen any of those films. The villain, on the other hand, sticks around as the franchise's primary icon. The Yautja in Predator isn't much of a character, but each entry seems to add a bit more about the alien that further fleshes out their behaviour. Predator is only partially a horror franchise, but the choice to centre one of its titular monsters as the protagonist is the biggest leap this series has taken yet. It's hard to imagine a Predator movie after Badlands returning to the tale of a bunch of humans avoiding the hunter. Yeah, and that's true, and that might be a good thing or it might be a bad thing. It could backfire. But at the same time, we've already had 6 films where the Predator has been the antagonist. It's become a bit of a go-to trope for the Predator films, like Jurassic Park. There's only so many times you can have dinosaurs break out of a theme park before it becomes redundant. You can't keep doing the same shit. You have to keep on reinventing yourself. And I think Predator is definitely in that stage of reinvention, and it has worked. I guess the real question now is, how do you expand it even further? How do you keep the ideas fresh and keep things from becoming a trope of previous films and becoming stale, or not selling out the brutality of the Predator franchise overall? Another aspect of Badlands I did really like, and is really intriguing if you are a fan of both Alien and Predator, is the Weyland-Yutani crossover potential. Weyland-Yutani is mentioned a lot in this film. It's very secretive. It's not an overbearing subplot, but it is definitely there. And Weyland-Yutani in Badlands isn't just a background corporate entity. They're directly tied to Thea and Tessa and the whole synthetic subplot. Their real motivations are also kept pretty mysterious too, for the most part. You know they're after specimens for bioweapons, but we don't really know much more than that. And this could tie into any of the Alien films as well. And I've got a very strong feeling that this was the whole point, is they're trying to bring the Alien into Predator and the Predator into Alien, so they can eventually have an Alien vs. Predator crossover again and restart that franchise and hopefully do it right this time. And if Trachtenberg is behind it, I have complete confidence that it's going to be done right this time. Or alternatively, you can ask me to direct and write Alien vs. Predator. That would be a franchise along with Terminator I would love to fucking direct. I've always wanted to direct a Predator or a Terminator film. And according to Trachtenberg, they didn't just throw in alien lore to cash in. The corporate thread came organically from wanting a robot/monster story. Interesting. That does make sense, but one can't help that they're trying to set up future sequels or a whole new future spin-off. And I guess the other real genius thing is that Deke is a character that could cross over into potential Alien vs. Predator sequels as well as Predator Badlands sequels and be a main character going forward. He's a young Predator. His co-partners are a gigantic alien beast that can't be killed and a synthetic. So these characters don't exactly age. So you could potentially take the story 200 years into the future. You could have Deke's character evolve over 10 or so films going forward. Also, according to Trachtenberg, there is no xenomorph in this movie. He did hint that if you were going to cross the two franchises over, this is how you would do it in a film like this. I'm paraphrasing. Is you would have it pop up in the movie. From the few trailers I did see, I was expecting there to be some type of alien Easter egg or mention in there somewhere. One of the boxes you see in the film has this kind of like black shape in it. It looks like the black goo from Prometheus. Actually, it could have been. That's another thing I haven't mentioned, is there probably is a lot of Easter eggs in this film as well that have been very cleverly hidden. And talking about Easter eggs, I think the most obvious one is when Deke and his brother are in the ship and they're in the trophy room. There's all different skulls on the wall. You see a human skull. You don't see an alien skull like Predator 2, which is obviously where the Alien Predator crossover most likely originated from. But what you do see is the Independence Day alien skull on the wall, which I thought was very funny and cool. I do like the Independence Day aliens. I think that idea of having this small alien in this like biomechanical suit was really original with the tentacles. It's got this giant fucking head and skinny legs. And unfortunately the sequel gives you more aliens but not really much substance and too much Liam Hemsworth. If anything could kill the Independence Day aliens, it's definitely the Predator. There's a T-Rex skull on the wall. There's other alien skulls from other movies and probably from the comics and expanded Predator universe. There's a human skull. There's a giant human skull, which I'm pretty sure is the engineer from Prometheus, which is cool because that's a direct alien crossover as well. That's all in the same universe. But I definitely have to see the film a few more times to pick up all the little things I missed out on. The Trachtenberg has said there is no xenomorph in this movie, so it's, quote, not a classic AVP movie in the literal sense, but the presence of Weyland-Yutani, their interests in dangerous species, and their synthetics do set the stage for future crossovers or lore expansion. Interesting, and that is according to Screen Rant and The Wrap. Very, very interesting. I'm very excited for the future of Predator films and Alien vs. Predator. For whatever reason, they set Alien vs. Predator in the modern day. Paul W.S. Anderson should be banned from making films, especially video game related films, because he just doesn't get it. He doesn't really get the core of video game stories and how they translate into films, because you can't make a film like Resident Evil or Alien vs. Predator a 90-minute fucking action movie and make it fucking PG-13. You have to set Alien vs. Predator in the future as well. Yeah, you need to bring in the colonial marines because it's the only way humans really get a half-fighting chance. That ties back into the games. It's not in the modern day, it's in the future. You can set it on exotic locations and you can have a well-thought-out and planned series of films taking place on different planets and be faithful to the games and comics. Trachtenberg is also interested in world building and not just monster fights for the sake of it, which also gives me faith that he is the right man to take this franchise into the future. Another interesting side note is there is quite a bit of crossover with the Predator Yautja creed and culture and Weyland-Yutani's corporate goals. Weyland-Yutani is ruthless in its pursuit of organisms and resources that benefit its own corporate agenda. And the Yautja ideology, as quoted by Deke in the film, is prey to none, friend to none, predator to all. Even though it does avoid the xenomorph, it plants the corporate biological seeds and puts Weyland-Yutani as a very strong subplot in the Predator universe, which obviously directly connects back to Alien. And it's very smart doing this as well, because I think if you just put an alien in this film, there's going to be so much hype and anticipation to make Alien vs. Predator and do it right, and it puts a lot of pressure on just getting that story out to appease the fans, rather than building something a little more time-consuming but ultimately more special. In other words, it kind of serves as a soft launch pad for a future Alien vs. Predator crossover or story arc. It doesn't force the issue or mash it up or just put a xenomorph in it for the sake of it, just so you can have this Marvel-esque character crossover, so you can have a cool, exciting action scene at the end of the film. And it seems like the point of this soft launch pad is to try to build a universe whereby both franchises coexist. It doesn't seem corny or forced like what was done in Alien vs. Predator in 2004, and then the Future Abomination sequel, Requiem. Because that was so dumb the way they try to cross those two franchises over. This seems a lot more organic. Weyland-Yutani is out searching the known universe for anything that gives it an edge in the corporate world, anything technological or biological that can boost its profit margins. They're out there scanning the universe for quote-unquote resources. They come across the alien, which we know they do if in Alien. This timeline is after Alien. Weyland-Yutani comes across the Yautja, or they already knew about them. Hence, they're trying to get both resources for their bioweapons department. They're the ones that bring the xenomorph into contact with the Predator. Or alternatively, the Yautja already knew that the aliens existed and had hunted them at some point. It's a much more organic way to merge the two franchises rather than just smash them together into a 90-minute action adventure set in Antarctica. Because as I said, I love Alien vs. Predator. The movies are not good, but the whole premise is really fucking cool. Why not? They're both owned by Fox. They can easily exist in the same world, and I think it's a stroke of genius. But it's just baffling why it's never been done properly. I've played a few of the PlayStation games. I've never played the computer games, but when I was a kid and I didn't have a computer, I would always see the screenshots of Alien vs. Predator thinking this looks like the fucking coolest game ever. The one on PlayStation 3, it was alright. You couldn't really aim the gun properly as the Marine, but yeah, it was okay. If we get a cool revamp of that could tie into a new series of films, that would be fucking awesome. There's elements of the first Alien vs Predator that I did like. I did like the mine aspect, but the Antarctic angle didn't really fit. The second one, I think I did like at the time because the bar had been set so low, but ultimately that film is just fucking shit. To get a bit more background on the Weyland-Yutani angle in Badlands, I found a very interesting article on Collider.com titled Predator Badlands, Dan Trachtenberg never set out to make an alien crossover. Here's how Weyland-Yutani got sucked in. It's by Tamara Jones and Perry Nemiroff, published November 8, 2025. In 2022, the world saw the heights of filmmaker Dan Trachtenberg could reach with an iconic horror sci-fi like Predator in his prequel feature, Prey. This year, his follow-up, an animated anthology, Predator, Killer of Killers, not only expanded the universe in massive ways, but it dropped exciting Easter eggs in the lead-up to his third exploration of the franchise, the theatrical released Predator Badlands. In an interview with Collider's Perry Nemiroff, Trachtenberg says, quote, "I'm so smitten with tethering an audience to a protagonist and really seeing the world through their eyes. And in Badlands, that's exactly what the director does with New Zealand actor Demetrius Schuster Kolomatangi. Through the eyes of Deke, a young Yautja, fans are introduced to what Fanning's android, Thea, calls, quote, the most dangerous planet in the universe, to prove himself a worthy warrior. In addition to Schuster and Fanning, Badlands also stars Michael Homick, Ruben de Jong, and Renali Nayarin, or something like that, however you pronounce their name. The Predator franchise has taken us far from Earth, but never quite like Trachtenberg, whose Killer of Killers and Badlands not only set off into the stars, but into the furthest reaches of time. The time period of Badlands, he explains in this conversation, is part of a larger design, as is the inclusion of aliens Weyland-Yutani synthetics, Thea and Tessa, a detail that initially sparked a lot of Alien vs Predator buzz. Trachtenberg also teases the idea he's excited about for another Predator movie, shares details on his original ideas for Deke and why those had to change, and discusses what about the iconic creature drew him to becoming one of the franchise's greatest champions. I'd be interested to know how he got involved with Predator. Badlands is not a Predator origin story, though we would be sat for a movie about Senate trade agreements between the different Yautja tribes. This is the question from Perry. Because I love hearing about how ideas evolve along the way, when you first wrapped Prey at that point, what did you think your next live-action story in the Predator franchise would look like, and how does that compare to how Badlands turned out? Trachtenberg, Killer of Killers and Badlands came kind of at the same time, and it was sort of like, well, which one would I want to make first? Also, in fairness, there was a third idea that I'm not speaking to, but they were all equally like, oh my gosh, wait a second, the fun thing wasn't just that. That would be so cool. A Predator movie hasn't done that yet. But also all the science fiction hasn't had a movie like this. So that's why I was sort of anxious to make it, and we did two at the same time. I didn't want to wait for one to happen after the other. Ambitious and busy man. One particular thing you do in this movie can often be a risk, having an iconic villain and then essentially explaining them away. It winds up taking away from the fear factor and the intensity of a character. Can you walk me through deciding that a Predator character would benefit from that? And also if you put any thought into how your movie would kind of retroactively change how people view Predator characters in other films. Yeah, that's interesting too, because I guess you can destabilize the villain, because when you look back at it, the other Predators probably aren't as scary. But having said that, the feral Predator in Prey and the red dreadlock one are fucking terrifying. And they are different, I suppose, different species or just different versions of the Predator. Well, not different versions, but like a slightly different tribe or clan, whatever it happens to be. They're not the same as Deke, so they retain the fear factor because the feral predator is probably the most aggressive, demented predator that we've seen so far, and it's called feral for a reason. So I don't think Deke's predator makes that one less scary, or the one from the first one, even though they do look very similar. On a whole, I think Deke's predator might destabilize the original predator a little bit because he's coming there to kill humans. Would Deke do that? Probably not, because he's a bit more evolved as a character, but if he was still in that clan tribe mentality, he probably would have turned out the same way as the predator from 1 and 2. And I think that's the real genius of what Trachtenberg has done, is he took the time to invest in this character over the course of the film. He's gone through ups and downs, and his morality and mentality have changed about what he thought the clan dynamics and what his role as a Yautja warrior was. Now that's being inverted, and he's turned out completely differently. He still is very brutal, and it'd be interesting to see where he goes in the future. I don't think it's been that destabilizing on a whole. Trachtenberg. I think even the original Predator, what was so refreshing about it and exciting was we had just been in the glut of Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, and then here comes a slasher movie where the antagonist had intelligence, skill, and culture, and it had a code. Nowhere in any of those other movies could you imagine them disarming themselves and deciding to fight their prey or their victim toe-to-toe, mano-a-mano, with honor, but that was instinctually a part of the Predator concept. I just wanted to take full advantage of what was there and very carefully just open the door a little bit wider. I knew it would be a trap to go fully deep dive in and have it be Predator origins or be more lore-focused than story-focused, or make a movie about the Senate trade agreements between the different Yautja tribes. So now you have just enough to understand the circumstances that Deke is faced with, and then he's thrust into this gauntlet. I'm guessing that refers to Star Wars Episode 1, Senate trade agreements of the Trade Federation, and that all that backstory explaining how that conflict started. I don't know, that kind of sounds pretty cool. And yes, I agree with him. That's the big thing that separated Predator, was he had his code of conduct. He wasn't the alien. He wasn't just going to kill anything in sight. He's not like Jason and Freddy, who's just literally butchering unarmed teenagers for the fun of it. The Predator has a code and an honor. Like, if you had to fight any one of those fictional movie monsters, I think I'd choose the Predator. I think the Predator could be reasoned with to a certain degree. And like when he fights Arnie, he doesn't have any weapons. So that's unhonorable to fight with his technology. The way you describe that kind of leans into the Weyland-Yutani question I had, because admittedly when I first heard you were incorporating the corporation into the movie, poor wording, but I thought it was worked in so simply and so naturally. Can you tell me about the moment when you figured out including Weyland-Yutani would benefit the story you wanted to tell? Trachtenberg. Well, I think it feels so organic and natural to the story because we didn't have the idea of, Weyland-Yutani, let's just put that in the movie. It came from not wanting to include any humans in the film. That's a very interesting decision, and I actually respect it a lot more after I've seen the film. There is no humans, it's just synthetics, which keeps the human angle out of it, obviously, and more about Deke's journey. Keep calling him fucking Deke. And then deciding on a story of a monster and a robot, how cool would that be? And then realizing I know a company that makes robots and we can actually include, as opposed to trying to jam it all in. Very interesting. I think that's 100% true. It does feel very organic. There's no point I thought, they're just putting that in just to try to create this crossover. It actually makes a lot of sense because out of Predator and Alien, which company makes the synthetics? There's no synthetics in Predator that I'm aware of. Natural progression would be Weyland-Yutani. And we know Weyland-Yutani is in Alien vs. Predator. Yutani Corporation, I think, is in one of the Predator video games and probably the comics. I haven't read them, so forgive my ignorance. It definitely does seem like a natural crossover. What was challenging was the time period, because we are set in the far future, purposefully. so that we didn't step on the toes of whatever Fede Alvarez was doing, or of course whatever Noah Wyle was doing, and yet still wanted things to feel Weyland-Yutani. And the thing that makes it feel Weyland-Yutani is a lot of like MS-DOS style prompts and analog buttons and features. It's also the first Predator film to be set that far into the future, because it doesn't give a time. So if it's definitely ahead of Romulus, would put it probably after Aliens. That obviously puts it in the same timeline as the Colonial Marines. Designing Deke, the runt who redefines what a Predator can be. What did you picture him looking like initially, and what kind of tools did you think you would need to use in order to bring him to life, and how does it ultimately compare to how you all went about it and what he looks like in the finished film? Trachtenberg, the main aesthetic difference was when we first started out, I thought what made him a runt was going to be that he was blind. Interesting. I was thinking a lot about Blind Fury with Rugeheia and the Book of Eli, which is kick-ass, and thought that would be the exciting thing, to see this runt of the litter that has to compensate. He was going to use the clicks with a mask that he had made himself as a form of echolocation to embrace the Predator vision in a new way. Very interesting. As we started developing the film and Ganna, and I'm so smitten with tethering an audience to a protagonist and really seeing the world through their eyes, that did not go with a character who's blind. That would tempt me, filmmaking-wise, to actually not see certain things, so I abandoned that, and that was a huge design layer of it. I truly thought when we first started that it would be a totally prosthetic build once again, and we did test with Alec Giles in the very beginning. He came up and said, I do not think we can do what this movie needs this way. And then the movie became this awesome handhold between Alec and Weta Workshop to physically build the suit, as well as Weta Digital and countless other visual effects houses to create a visual effects rendition of the face. Demetrius is still in a full-body prosthetic suit. We still wanted to honour that franchise, but we needed the nuances and the range that only we can get now with visual effects to take over in certain areas. And I think that was a perfect balance too, because only in some of the visual effects fight scenes is Deke actually completely animated. The entire time it just looks like a guy in a suit like the other Predator films. He's pretty much acting through the suit and the face is being filled in with visual effects. What is an unexplored corner of the Predator franchise you think would be the most creatively fulfilling for you to explore next? Trachtenberg, there are now so many ways in which we can explore it. In the animated setting, in the live action, there are so many different characters that we can pursue in some ways, but also different kinds of places we can go to that we haven't before. There are certain journeys we've never seen a sci-fi franchise take on, and some of those are the most exciting for me, which is good because he doesn't really give away what he is working on. Another thing I forgot to add about the film is in the last couple of years we've seen some truly epic running times with some films. Some films seem unnecessarily long or drawn out. As much as I'm looking forward to Avatar Fire and Ash, I'm not looking forward to the 3 hour and 10 minute running time. Badlands running time is fucking perfect, 107 minutes. It fits with the other Predator films. Just under 2 hours, no time to waste. I think it's the perfect length of time for a Predator film. So why do I love Predator? As I mentioned at the start of the show, Predator is one of my favourite franchises, and it's one that's been with me ever since I was a kid. Probably shouldn't have been watching it at the age I was. I first saw the original Predator when I was probably in like year 5. Probably way too young to see a movie that violent. But I remember watching Channel 10, playing in the front room with my brother and seeing an ad for this Arnold Schwarzenegger film that I'd never heard of. I was probably 12, 13 at the time, maybe younger, 10 to 13, something like that. I was obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger and his films. I still am. I've got a signed facsimile limited edition Arnold Schwarzenegger photo collage framed on my wall. It's some of his most iconic bodybuilding shots. Every day when I wake up, it's the first thing I look at. That might seem a little bit weird, but he's a person I've always looked up to. I've always been inspired by what he's accomplished, and I still try to use that as inspiration today. And I remember seeing this ad on TV. I thought, I've never seen this movie before. It's not Terminator, it's not Conan, it's not Commando, but he's in, army fatigues. He's in the jungle with the biceps out and the combat vest with an M16. I can't exactly remember what the ad said, but it was along the lines of the hunters have become the hunted, and then you see the predator coming out of the water and the invisibility cloak sparking and turning off, and you get this quick glimpse of the predator, and I thought, whoa, what the fuck is that? That looks awesome. This is a Arnold Schwarzenegger alien film I've never heard of. Of course, it was a Sunday night, and that meant school the next day, so I had to tape it. It started at 8:30, went to about 10:30. As soon as I got home from school that day, I remember watching it with my brother. After homework, we rushed up the front and put it on. I was a bit shocked by the level of violence in it, but I absolutely fucking loved it, and it started this obsession with Predator. I remember the first time I saw the Predator, I was terrified and mesmerized at the same time. And it's not really until the end of the film, the final big fight, that it actually reveals what it really looks like when it takes its helmet off. I remember seeing it and just thinking, whoa, what a fucking cool design. I remember seeing the dreadlocks and the mask in the ad along with the fishnets, which is kind of weird because fishnets are a human thing. And then seeing like the bone necklaces and the spinal cord hanging off of it, and thinking this looks like this tribal Rastafarian alien. And then when you see it without the mask on, you see the mandibles and this just crazy extreme design. And it instantly hooked me. I remember getting the DVD a couple of years later and watching all the special features and finding out that Stan Winston was on a plane ride with James Cameron after shooting Terminator. He said he was working on this new film and he had to come up with an alien and he wanted to design something that hadn't been seen, and James Cameron made the suggestion. I think it'd be cool to see something with mandibles. I think the dreadlocks was Winston's idea, and then came that concept of a Rastafarian alien. Because the creature wasn't just any ordinary movie monster, it was an intelligent, ritualistic, and honor-bound creature. It had this code which was far different from a lot of the movies I'd seen. I think my brother and I watched Predator like every day that week, and it became one of my most watched films, and I still watch it to this day. So it's had a massive impact on me. When I found out there was a Predator 2, I remember seeing that a few years later, not being as impressed. It should have been really cool. It should have been Predator, but set in the city, the concrete jungle. But it was just so excessively violent and didn't really have much of a backbone to that story. And it was set in, 97, so it's kind of set a few years in this future with some drug war in LA, and it was just fucking stupid. It should have been either set in the future or the present day, because there was a way they could have made it a lot better, and it just happens to be the hottest year, because that became another cliche of the Predator films, is the Predator had to come to Earth in the hottest years to hunt. And that's an aspect Trachtenberg has corrected. That aspect of the film was cool, but it was a bit silly at the same time. It's a little bit lame. And going back to Badlands, I definitely had a sense of nostalgia. It was Predator, but it was Predator done differently. Deke this time around is not just a killing machine, he's a vulnerable, lost, honor-seeking young Yautja trying to find his way back into the clan. He's not a seasoned hunter. You combine that with Thea's synthetic trauma, which balances out the story and gives it a lot of emotion and heart, which could mean very exciting things for the future of the franchise. As much as I love the first one, I don't think the franchise needs to go in that direction anymore. I think it probably needs to go in the direction of Badlands. The first 3 films were all good in their own right. The first one's a masterpiece. The second one isn't the greatest film ever made. It's got a lot of issues with it. I did like Predators. I do think that movie is underrated. It's taking that same concept, but kind of taking it to the next level in a way, by taking it off of Earth and onto a game reserve. The Predators are more dangerous. There's more Predators this time around, hence the name Predators. It tried to do that aliens thing. That could have been a cool road to go down. Unfortunately, future sequels didn't really live up to the original, but I am glad Trachtenberg has come into the franchise and he's taken it in the direction he has, because I think this is the way forward for the future of the franchise. Because Badlands isn't just another Predator movie, it's a redefinition. It's given the Yautja agency. It explores their language, their culture, their society, and it weaves this corporate xenobiology subplot without feeling like cheap fan service. What I liked is the scale and scope of this film. I love the expansion of the franchise and the Yautja culture. I love the time period. I love they made Deke a runt. He's vulnerable. He's not the massive, oversized predator that's pretty much invincible. I liked Thea. She provides the emotional heart and backbone to the story, and they were a very odd pair, but they also worked. I did like Bud. I thought Bud was pretty cool. All the characters in this film do have a bit of a secret. They're not quite as they appear sometimes. I also liked that there was no humans in this. They're all synths. It's the first time a Predator film has done that. And when you think about it, Predator Badlands does have a lot of firsts. It's the first time we've had Predator language, the first time a Predator has been a protagonist, the first time they've had a robot companion, and they really haven't worn a mask for much of the film. And it ties back into a much bigger universe, which will hopefully be expanded on in future sequels. I did like the mix of practical and digital effects. I thought that was the right way to go. I liked the planet designs as well. Yautja Prime was pretty cool. One other thing I haven't mentioned that I really did enjoy was the really original and brutal fucking soundtrack. I can't remember the name of the people who did the music, but fucking hell, what an original soundtrack that was. I don't even know what the instruments were. It's got this brutal, futuristic, tribal sound to it. I'm looking forward to future installments in the Predator franchise, and I hope Dan Trachtenberg sticks around and directs the next couple, because I definitely think he's the right man for the job. I'm very excited to see what he does next and where he takes his story. So, final thoughts. All in all, Predator Badlands is a big, bold, ambitious, emotional, lore-rich expansion of the Predator franchise. It delivers on the Predator thrills, hunts, alien danger, brutal landscapes, but also offers something new that we haven't seen before, an insight into Predator society, language and culture. It's the first time we've seen the Predator as the protagonist of the film, but it also has a surprising amount of heart. While the pacing is good, there are some uneven spots here and there. The world building is overall pretty good, but there are a few bits of the world building that don't quite fully pay off. But it's a giant, very bold step forward for the Predator franchise. It's new blood that has given life to a long-running franchise that really needed a new direction to go in. So I'm very excited to see what comes next. So all in all, I'll give it 4 out of 5. And that brings us to the end of the show and the very long-winded and ultra-detailed look at Predator Badlands, and a deep dive into the past, present and future of the Hunter and the Hunt. Check out the official Truth Tank merchandise store over on Etsy. The link is in the show notes and can be found on Instagram and Facebook. Get yourself some wearable truth, support the podcast and look good doing it. The Mark 1 collection is out now. It focuses on big bold logos and is the first generation of Truth Tank merchandise. Check out the Truth Cap. Everyone seems to like the cap. I had a lot of trouble designing that. I couldn't figure out how to fucking put the logo on it. When I did, apparently it was too complex and had too much colors to embroider. So I kind of had to come up with a creative solution. So I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to put truth on the hat. I wanted to use my American typewriter font that I always use, but they didn't have that, so I had to go for the next best thing, which you can see on the store, and that's how the Truth Tank cap came to be. If you like to support the Truth Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like, share them around. You can download and listen to your favorite episodes of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Castbox, YouTube, Pandora, Audible, Amazon Music, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you think might like the show. Help spread it around and get the Truth Tank out there. You can leave a 5-star rating review on your preferred podcast player or all of them. Each review helps the show grow and get found. I'll be back in the next couple of weeks. But until then, I'm a Tank. This is the truth. Truth to tell.